Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Blasphemous. I played on the Xbox Series X. It's available on, everything. I mean, everything. So let's get into the story. You play as the Penitent One, and you are in a land that I can't pronounce, and basically everything in this world is deeply religious. It's all based around, sin and penitence and all sorts of shit, and it's really fucked up and weird lore. And really, getting into the story is kind of weird and difficult because not unlike the games that clearly inspire this, which would be the Soulsborne series, the game is more based around lore than it is a traditional story. The Penitent One clearly very much has a goal, and you are playing the Penitent One in order to complete that goal, but everything else surrounding it, even the goal itself, isn't ever clearly explained to you. It's not what I would call a story-driven game. So let's get into the audio, and I'm going to say I like the music in this game. I think the music is well done. I think it really fits with everything that's going on. I have no complaints there. As for the sound effects, I'll say very much the same thing. I think they worked well in the game. And then you have the voiceover. There's not a ton of it, but where it is, it really does fit with what's going on. It fits with the characters and the other people in the game. But let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a side-scrolling metroidvania Soulsborne style game. So the Metroidvania elements are, you are side-scrolling, you are exploring the map, you are finding upgrades so that you can explore more, you are defeating enemies to level up and, defeat bosses, which is also very Soulsborne. The Soulsborne elements are things like you have limited healing items. When you die, you leave a marker that you can go back and collect. And enemies can wreck you so very, very easily, even just base enemies. I would say I probably got murdered by base enemies more than I did by bosses. And I would say this game's bosses are more akin to those from Castlevania. Learn the pattern. One small mistake is not going to completely screw you. Whereas a Soulsborne boss, one small mistake, whether you've learned the patterns or not, you are dead. The biggest complaint I have in the gameplay element is I ran into one boss that was cheap as fuck because it would go halfway off the screen where you couldn't go or attack it, so it was kind of in a situation that fucked you over, and that's just poor design. But the game does play out very much Metroidvania style, and if you've ever played a Castlevania Metroid game, you know the gameplay mechanics pretty well. But let's get into the controls, and the first thing I'm going to say is don't play this game on the Xbox personally. I think the PlayStation has a much better controller for this style of game. I think that big-ass D-pad and its position on a PlayStation controller is far superior for side-scrollers than on the Xbox. That's a mistake I made. That being said, overall they worked pretty well, but there were definitely times where I was unhappy with the controls. Specifically, there are areas of ground where you can press down and the jump button and, fall through the ground like you're supposed to be able to. That doesn't work. That doesn't always respond the way it should. The controls don't always respond well when jumping onto ladders. I know in general ladders in video games are a problem, but it was still very frustrating and it was a little more noticeable in this game. And those were the two main issues I had. Was I would be doing those, and generally it became an issue when I was trying to avoid an enemy and just traverse, and the game would be like, nah, fuck you didn't do that. I generally didn't die from it, although there were a few times where I did die from it. But going beyond that, I would say in combat, the controls worked very well. I don't have any complaints there. So the controls, for the most part, I will say are good. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals, and this is very much that pixelated, not overly pixelated, but still very heavily pixelated art style. But it's this weird, everything looks like it could have been hand-drawn and then pixelated. So it's this weird visual style, but I think it definitely works with the game. And man, if you've ever wondered what a Soulsborne game would look like as a pixelated side-scroller, this is that visually. It really is. It does have its own unique, weird, and disturbing style, but that so very much fits with Soulsborne. But at the same time, they do a great job with all the different biomes and really differentiating them, giving you a very unique looking character and giving you a lot of unique enemies. There are a couple of just reskins, but then you run into something that you haven't seen before, and I appreciate that. Overall, I was really happy with the weird visual style, and one of my favorite things is there's a church, and outside of that church, you can see some kind of weird village stuff going on. There was one point where there was 5 people trying to load this fat-ass pig into a wheelbarrow. It was just kind of entertaining, and I just like that they put those little weird details in the background, but I do love what they built overall, and the opening boss, like once you beat it, you get a little cutscene, and that kind of sums up how weird and disturbed the style of this game is. And I loved it because they just went, hey, here's the vibe. So let's get into the wrap up, and to put it simply, I really enjoyed the vibe of this game. Like, I knew visually going into this clearly had its Soulsborne origins, and gameplay wise it's metroidvania, but they merged them very well, and I thought they did a great job, and overall I'm just really happy with the game. So I'm gonna say, if you haven't played it, I recommend playing it. I had a very good time with it. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what is your favorite Soulsborne spin-off? Honestly, I gotta say, I think mine is either Neo or The Surge. I really enjoy those two. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.